Antimage and Isekai LitRPG Adventure, Ends of Magic Book 1, Audiobook by Kevin Chapter 27. A beast of terror, Nathan glanced back at the cave that had housed the nest of ashblood cobras. It looked the same as it had when they'd first arrived only a few hours ago. Nathan wondered how long it would be before the next group of adventurers arrived to clear a threat from the ruined town. Maybe we should just destroy the place. Might take Stella a few days. Nathan almost proposed it, but just sighed. Maybe Gemor could establish a village here instead. He had been trying to learn more about his new home, but he definitely didn't understand all the intricacies of Davrar and the people who lived within it. Not well enough to be sure it was a good idea to destroy a place like this. He was thinking about raising the point anyway when Stella spoke up, her voice excited. She had been staring in the direction the Dust Eaters had gone, ensuring they were well out of sight. Then she turned back to the heirs. "I leveled up to 81, Sarah laughed aloud, punching Stella lightly in the arm. "Freedom and brightness. Have you sent a message to your parents yet? I imagine they'll have some strong opinions." The red-haired mage looked self-satisfied. "I'll talk to them tonight, but I think my choice is petrified in place. One of the classes is Mage of the Natural Law. It says that I'll be able to cast magic more aligned with the natural laws of the world and will make me more powerful when my magic works with the world instead of against it." "Oh, that sounds powerful with the insights I've already given Stella, not to mention the ones I can still teach her." Nathan sucked in a breath. "Yup, that seems powerful. You should still call Dalo. I don't want him any madder at me." "What are the other class choices?" Arl asked. "If you would share." Shrugging, Stella read from the invisible screen of Davrar. "Stormlord, Master of the Elements, Mage of Light's Color, Man-All Prodigy, Electro-Savant." Arl seemed somewhat shocked. "That seems many for a level 81 development. I was only offered 3 choices." Stella raised her hands in a tada motion. Multicolored lights shone from her fingers. "I am the dragon's heir. It is no wonder Davrar blesses me so." Kachai spoke sarcastically. "You are the heir of the most powerful mages of Gemor, and of Nathan's insights. Do not grow arrogant, Stella. Remember from whence your power comes." She waved a hand dismissively at him, declaiming with grandeur, "I will solve all problems with magic." Man, I kind of wish that were me. Stella seemed too excited to stand still and started talking about some of the trade-offs between her options. Nathan quickly got involved in the conversation, but not before following an errant train of thought. "We're hitting level 81 already, a threshold that some adventurers struggle for years to reach. What gives? Well, we've been taking on some challenges that you might say are above our level, and are rather dangerous. I also haven't hit 81, but that's probably because I haven't been killing things." As they traveled south, Stella spent a good deal of time talking to her parents about her class development options. It was amusing to watch the silent conversation, and Stella at times grew frustrated, accepting, argumentative, and finally victorious. She had the occasional outburst, but the actual conversation was entirely silent. The heirs had camped on the side of a sandy hill, almost a dune, a good ways south of where they'd fought the ashblood cobras. They'd pushed into the night and covered a pretty incredible distance. They'd kept going to try to find a good campsite. There had been a few dungeons, but nothing you'd want to camp in. But this one should be fine, since they were still some distance away from where the terror ghast had been seen. Stella quickly kindled a magical fire, warming water out of a water skin to dissolve a stew packet. They were all tired from the day of fighting and traveling. Nathan was looking forward to food and his bedroll. The desert had quickly grown cold after nightfall, and he was definitely getting chilly now that they'd stopped moving. But first, he and Arl set out the tripwires, driving small stakes into the ground and stretching thin strings taut between them, tied to bells. They laid 2 layers around the camp. Normally they set a third, but that was usually because there was some kind of natural barrier that protected one side of their camp. But this hillside was barren, and they only had enough tripwires to circle the camp twice. There really doesn't seem to be much out here. How do the villagers survive in this place? Nathan supposed he'd find out the next time they approached a village, though since the heirs wanted to maintain a low profile, that might not be any time soon. He sat down on the dusty ground next to the campfire, holding out his hands to the warmth. It wasn't warming him up. Right, magical fire, immune to magic. Boo. Instead, Nathan grabbed the blanket from his bedding and draped it around himself, careful to scoot back from the fire so as not to set the precious fabric ablaze. "So, the terror gassed," Sarah said once everyone had gathered around the fire. "Bet you stalker teeth to dragon bones that I can shoot it through the skull before it even knows we're there." Stella chuckled and Arl kept stirring the stew, but Kachai frowned into the fire. He looked up, the flames illuminating his jowls. Much of the value in facing a terrorghast is the ability to rank up and develop our mental magic defenses, while fighting a dangerous foe that nonetheless should not truly threaten us. Arl looked up from tasting the stew. "And hear me, my dearest sister, but I believe that we are not the ones in need of more levels at the moment, nor is Stella. We should allow Nathan or Kachai to fell this beast. How close are you two to 81? 5. Kachai's voice was pleased that the conversation had gone in this direction. "I have mostly fought in a protective role and not taken many standout risks. You have all been the ones slaying monsters and tallying deeds, like leaping into the heart of an enemy's camp. I have merely been a protector. It is the path I have chosen. And I haven't really killed anything," Nathan added. "I think the last monster I killed might have been that stalker back on our first patrol, with the spear, which is now out of commission." He frowned. "I've been psyching myself up for so long it feels anticlimactic to get in so many fights without landing any death blows." "It's not your build," Arl said. "You're a brawler and it's hard to kill the enemies we've faced with fists." The rest of the heirs nodded along, seeming unbothered by the bloodthirst Nathan had just expressed. "I suppose I still have the lowest body count of any of the heirs," Nathan continued. "I just mean that it's weird. I'm leveling quickly, we all are, but I've been told that the way to do that is by killing, and I haven't been doing that." Arl answered him, dishing up the soup and handing out bowls and spoons. "But you have taken the greatest risks and accomplished the most impressive things that aren't killing. Davrar rewards that as well." He shook his head disbelievingly. "I am not sure I would believe the tale of you being thrown into the center of an Agman camp, destroying their siege spike, and then fleeing with 100 legionaries in hot pursuit, or doing the same with those crystals on the banks of the Drakefish. Charging a Giant's Rest Archmage is usually suicide. Earlier today, you climbed inside the mouth of a Ashblood Cobra matriarch. I am surprised you are not level 81 already. Such feats are the way to quick levels, or a quicker death." Kachai met Nathan's gaze. "I would surrender the kill of the terrorghast to you, Nathan, if you would have it." Nathan shrugged. "I appreciate it, but I'll get there soon enough anyway, and how would I even kill it? My spear broke." Arl reached into his pouch, pulling out the enchanted spearhead. "I retrieved the spearhead from the matriarch, but I can't mount it on a new shaft, not well at least." Sarah looked from Nathan to Kachai. "So no shooting it in the head from a mile away." Nathan turned to the headshot gunslinger. "Can you shoot something from a mile away?" "Maybe," she replied, tilting her head in thought. "If not now, then soon. A bunch of my class skills developed, including the ones that increase range and accuracy. Just need more levels to give those skills the power they need to kill any nemesis." Stella sighed and leaned back on her bedroll. "So Kachai kills the terrorghast," Nathan nodded. "Yup, so long as it's not too dangerous. The instant it truly threatens somebody, everybody's free to light it up." "Light it up?" Arl asked. "You know, shoot it a lot." Everybody gave Nathan confused looks. "What? It's not like your sayings are much better. You say fart ice when somebody's being cantankerous." Chuckling, Kacha shook his head. Watch schedules. We are not in particularly dangerous territory, so I believe one person on watch should be enough. I will take first watch, then Arl, Sarah, Nathan, and Stella. There was a bit of grumbling from everybody at having interrupted sleep, but they all acquiesced. At least Kacha was taking first watch. Nathan was awoken several hours later by a strangled shout and a wave of magic washing over him. He snapped awake, adrenaline flowing through his veins and bringing him to full alertness in an instant. His stamina felt like a shot of espresso atop his adrenaline. He kicked aside the blanket and rolled to his feet in his underwear, the night air cold against bare skin. In the blue-green light of the world above, he looked down the slope to take in the scene. Arl was awkwardly crouched 10 feet away, half risen from his seat next to the campfire. His teeth were gritted and both hands trembled as they reached into his pouches. Sarah was stuck in her bedroll, jerking spasmodically. Kachai was slowly sitting up, but Stella's form was still. Nathan spun to follow his Arl's gaze, head turning towards the source of a soft, shuffling noise. And he saw the Terrorghast. Its sandy scales blended into the hillside, looking like a large boulder daintily flowing down the hillside. Its 6 legs were as thick as tree trunks, and the wide snout was decorated with 3 short tentacles that hid its mouth. Nathan yelled out a warning as he watched it carefully step over the outer layer of tripwires. That says worrying things about its intelligence. Then the third eye pulsed. It was a pit of darkness atop the creature's forehead, looking less like an eye and more like a portal to a realm of roiling shadows. Nathan sorted the mana of the spell that washed over him and the rest of the heir's death, dream, mental. A bit of shadow, complex but powerful, seems to trigger the atavistic fear reflex. Deer in the headlights response. Spell structure is interesting, definitely not made of component parts slotted together. Feels more organic. High-tier spell sense 6 achieved. Then he snapped the effect of the spell over his metaphorical knee and let out a bellow as he charged the beast unarmed. The Terrorghast let out a rasping noise, like sandpaper wearing away metal. It countercharged, sounding the bells loudly as its rear feet knocked over the tripwires the front legs had carefully stepped over. The spell redoubled, washing over Nathan's immunity. Try to eat me and my friends in our sleep, eh? Let's see where that gets you. Nathan greeted his rage like an old friend, feeling limitless strength course through his body. His strides lengthened and his bare feet dug into the cold sand. He felt like he was accelerating a ponderous mass towards an enormous collision. The smart thing to do would have been to dodge around the Terrorghast, which clearly outweighed Nathan at least 10-1. I don't even have the excuse of my rage anymore, not since I got battle meditation. I just want to test my biologically engineered strength and the momentum of my class, and I have backup just seconds away. Nathan collided with the bulk of the Terrorghast, his hands outstretched. His palms dented into the rubbery flesh of the creature's face as they slammed into each other. The beast's head was shoved backwards on its stubby neck, the collision clearly more forceful than the Terrorghast had been expecting. His feet planted, Nathan was still thrust backwards a good half-dozen paces through the sand, but the Terrorghast seemed somewhat dazed from the impact and staggered to a halt. It reared its head back, exposing a broad mouth filled with flat teeth as it wrapped its mouth tentacles around Nathan's arms. It pulled him inwards, pushing its head forward to take a bite. But Nathan stepped back, yanking hard on the tentacles. He ripped his left hand free and brought it up in an uppercut, connecting cleanly with the Terrorghast's jaw while pulling its face down into the blow with the tentacles wrapped around his right hand. There was an audible crack of bone as the blow connected and the Terrorghast's jaw clicked shut, its head lurching with the power of the blow. Nathan thought he'd probably broken a knuckle, but he'd also felt part of the jaw give way. The tentacles released his right hand and Nathan ducked away from the beast. Before I'd say it looked confident. Now it just looks pissed. The Terrorghast let out another rasping roar, this one definitely more pained and angry. From behind him, Nathan heard a faint sound. Then Arl was next to him, bringing the force saber down to slice into one of its forelegs. It was a weak cut, betrayed by the shaking of Arl's limbs as he fought against the mind magic. The creature swung its head around to bite him, but Kachai ran forward and slammed his hammer into the side of the Terrorghast's face with a powerful blow, crushing the tentacles and staggering the enormous creature once more. Nathan was ready to help, his rage boiling in his veins, but it didn't look like he needed to. Kachai spoke as he swung his hammer, his tone starting weak but growing stronger as he beat on the scaled horror. I stand against you, creature of night. You prey in darkness and terror, hunting civilization from the shadows. And I say no more. You will die here and will not live to threaten the hopes of the people of Gemor. His armor and hammer grew brighter as he chanted, until their golden glow outshone that of the continents overhead. The effect clearly empowered the cleric's strikes, and Nathan felt the waves of terror emanating from the beast push back as the golden light spread through the night. Arl took a calming breath from beside him as the Terrorghast collapsed to its knees. Kachai cast aside his shield, bringing both hands up to wield his hammer, which seemed to grow in size. Then he brought it down on the creature's forehead, crunching through its third eye and into the brain. The giant scaled form shuddered and was still. What just happened? Behind them, Stella sat all the way up, blinking around blearily. Sarah chuckled, lowering her rifle from the ready position. Good morning, glad to have you joining us. Would you like some pastries or some of the monster we just killed? You have leveled up to level 79. Congratulations, your party has killed a Terrorghast. Oh, come on, you gotta be kidding me. Nathan rolled his eyes hard, staring at the blue box with something resembling exasperation or longing. I want to see what my level 81 options are, and actually be able to think about my level up options for once, without being forced to make a choice or get crushed by circumstances. I hope I didn't just jinx myself. Meanwhile, the golden light emanating from Kachai hadn't dimmed. He bent down and carefully laid his hammer on the ground before holding both hands up to the night sky. The cleric reached out, questing into empty air with fingers spread. Then he closed his hands on something, and a golden cable manifested itself under the wolfman's gauntlets. The cable spiraled up into the sky, separating into strands that divided again and again, until it seemed like Kachai was holding onto a magical rope that connected to the entire world above. Now that it was tangible, Nathan could feel the mana radiating out from the object. It was made of divine mana so dense it was solid. Well, that's new. Let's hope Kachai knows what he's doing. Kachai grasped the cable more firmly and began to pull, but no amount of muscle would suffice to move this burden. As he pulled, the martial cleric of Daemon began to speak, declaiming to the sky, I am a worshipper of Daemon and follow his principle of righteous battle. I fight to defend my home from monster, construct, and empire. I act with honor, dignity, and respect in combat and out. I maintain my resolve in the face of temptation and take the righteous path, over and over. The rope responded to his words, growing even brighter and more defined until Nathan had a hard time looking at it directly. But Kachai wasn't done. I follow Daemon's scriptures and shall inherit a portion of his divinity. I will use it to stand against the evil of this world, to judge that which must be judged, and protect that which must be protected. Now the rope was descending, and seemed to be vanishing into Kachai's chest as he continued his sermon to the sky. My team and I undertake an impossible task, but one that Daemon himself would approve of. I follow his teachings in this, and I will have the power to see it through. Grant me this shard of divinity, that I might protect Gemor and my team from all threats and fight the endings themselves. The rope continued to spool from the sky and into Kachai, casting light onto the hillside and across the shallow valley. His next words reverberated through the desolate landscape, impressing themselves on the fabric of Davrar. This is my vow, worthy of a piece of the divine. I will fight evil wherever I find it, and extend a hand of kindness to those in need. I will protect those who cannot protect themselves, and use my power to counter forces that would bring ruination. The surge of divine mana coiled down into Kachai's form, and his feet left the ground to receive it as his head was thrown back in a silent howl. Nathan hesitated, almost wanting to go pull his friend away. No, this is his class development. He's mentioned that he needs to craft his own shard of divinity, and I think this is how it happens. Seems like a bad thing to interfere with. For all that the moment seemed to stretch on into eternity, it couldn't have been more than 30 seconds before Kachai's feet settled back onto the sandy hillside, and the coiled mana stopped flowing into his chest. The wolfman almost crumpled to his knees but caught himself on the haft of his hammer head bowed. Nathan glanced around. Stella was fully awake now, while Arl and Sarah both had their weapons holstered. All of them were a bit dazed by the light show that had just occurred. That was one big damned beacon pointing straight at us, even if it only lasted a minute. We probably need to get out of here. Kachai, you all right? Was that your development? Nathan's voice was questioning, uncertain if Kachai was done. But the towering figure in full plate shook himself and looked up as if seeing the world anew. His voice seemed to have a faint reverberation to it. I am well. I have developed my class. I am now a divine justicar. He smiled at them, the expression somehow beatific even through his canine fangs. I would ask that you hold this event close to your heart. This is the greatest of Kia's insights and the only path left to a wielder of the divine since the ending of Deicide. Done, Nathan confirmed. Now we need to move. That light could guide anything or anybody to us. Let's get packed. Chapter 28 Dungeons. The heirs traveled a few miles away from the site of Kachai's class development, putting some distance in between themselves and the giant beacon that had temporarily lit up the night sky. They found a replacement campsite, placed in a saddle between two hills. There was a convenient depression that hid them from every direction unless standing directly atop either of the two adjacent hills. Then the heirs crashed, with Nathan grumpily staying awake to keep watch. The night was still cold, and Stella hadn't set a magical fire before she fell back asleep. Not that it would have done too much good to keep Nathan warm. It was probably for the best. It didn't emit much smoke, but any light or magic would probably make them easier to track. Nathan would prefer being a bit paranoid if it kept them hidden from Tial or this battered character. It would be nice to get my level 81 class development before that happens. You know, the one I'm 2 levels off from. Would I feel better if I was 1 level off from it? Probably not. But the Terrorghast was just a single monster, and one that any one of the heirs could have killed pretty easily. Sarah and Arl both worked through the fear spell. It clearly didn't hinder Kachai much, and Stella is just a deep sleeper. I wonder if anybody got anti-mental magic rank-ups from that. Nathan spent some time musing over class developments, keeping his eyes moving to ensure he had all angles of approach covered. If anybody's class development was going to be accompanied by a fireworks display, Nathan would expect it to be Stella's. Sarah and Arl's had been without drama, but Kachai's class development had been a surprise. Stella hadn't developed her class yet, though she probably would soon. I do want to hear more about what class skills she'll get. She only mentioned the one that lets her make her magic stronger when it is aligned with the natural laws of the world. But that wasn't Nathan's primary question. Why had Kachai's class development involved him absorbing a splinter of divinity? I think it's just the issues with being a cleric to a dead god. There's not enough magical oomph in the vending machine, and eventually you have to learn how to can your own soda. I dunno, I'm not a mage or a cleric. This is just spitballing. I could ask him, but that's very much intruding on the most important insights he has. Nathan mused about his own development. What did he want? Were there any last-minute things he could do to guide his class choices at level 81? The Guardians had indicated that what he needed was more mobility and better dodging. If Nathan could get a class skill that enhanced his capacity to dodge and synergized with his 3 existing mobility skills, that would be great. But I've been doing a lot of dodging already, thank you very much. And bleeding all over everything, but that's just par for the course. I wonder if there's a class skill for bleeding all over things. Maybe something that means lost body parts and blood retain my antimagic. It currently ends as soon as something isn't a part of me anymore. He would also enjoy another way to regenerate stamina or expand his stamina pool. As it stood, he was nearly unstoppable and very hard to kill or even wound, so long as he had stamina. Any injuries would just heal, and he could use rage to compete with melee fighters who had builds otherwise superior to his. But that was only true as long as he had stamina. So long as there was magic flying around a battlefield, he'd be able to get it back. But if Nathan was separated from his allies and his enemies wised up, he might run into issues. He'd think about if there was any way to increase his stamina pool. Maybe he was already on the right track in getting pumped past his stamina cap on a regular basis. There were certainly more things on Nathan's wish list. He couldn't wield weapons or wear armor very effectively. His skin acted as a natural suit of armor, but he did always end up basically naked after every fight. A skill to protect his clothing might be nice, but that's basically just cosmetic. I shouldn't give a shit about that if the alternative is getting stronger for my chosen purposes, Giant's Rest and the endings, and more generally promoting benevolent civilizations. But that's very long-term. Nathan sighed, hunching a little farther down in his blankets. He could imagine a bunch of improvements, maybe something that would interface with his enhanced body. The Guardians also mentioned stealth. My only idea is to use perfected body to make pigments for camouflage. It's something to keep in mind. My antimagic would work well with skills to help being sneaky, but I don't know how to get into that. Would probably be easier if I had a stealth utility skill. I'd kind of been intending to drop lecturing eventually, but I'm really not sure that's a good idea. I promised to teach Stella more magic insights, and it helps a ton with that. If I ever want to spread more earthly insights, the printing press, crop hybridization, whatever, it will be invaluable. Nathan shook his head, considering. What else? Something that would enable him to be capable of wielding weapons. He'd been offered some kind of fighter class at every development so far. Maybe it was time to take one. No, that's probably a terrible idea. I'll just have to see what I get offered. I'll keep focusing on dodging, though, and anti-magic. It's kind of my whole thing, even if I know it's not perfect. I lost a hand to the siege spike after all, and that was magic. Nathan spent the rest of his watch scanning the barren earth around them, waiting for a group of mages or another monster to come over the ridge and attack. But the night was serene, and Nathan kept thinking about what he wanted from his next class development. I kind of wish I could pick up airwalking before my class development. Class skills that explicitly synergized with airwalking would be sick, but I don't think that's going to happen. After Nathan's shift was up, he woke Stella, which was annoyingly difficult. The red-haired mage was deeply swaddled in an absurdly soft blanket and didn't respond until Nathan basically picked her up and dropped her on the bedroll underneath. She glared up at him. I'm sure you could have found a better way to do that. He looked back without much pity. Maybe, but not after the night we've had. I want to hear about your new class. Stella smiled. I'm planning on developing it soon. Do you want to stay up and hear about it? Nathan considered, looking between Stella and his bed. Correction. I want to hear about it once I get some sleep. Then Nathan wrapped himself tightly in his own blanket. The sun started shining down from directly overhead before long, but Nathan just rolled over and went back to sleep. The heirs slept in a bit. allowing themselves to delay their morning exercise for the sake of catching up on sleep they'd missed in the nighttime attack and their subsequent hasty departure. Eventually, Nathan got up and had an unremarkable breakfast with the rest of the heirs around the fire, which Stella had set during her watch. They all sat staring into the dancing flames for a time, waking up after the difficult night. There was a lot of stretching and complaining from sleeping on an uneven surface. Stella initiated the conversation, gesturing to Kache. "Congratulations to us both. I'm free of regret for my own development. I hope you are too." Kache nodded slowly, looking thoughtful. "My new skills are to my satisfaction. I am specializing more in divine magic than my mother, at the cost of martial ability. My new class skills will enable me to cast strong defensive spells with divine magic, and they will be capable of adapting to the threat we face. I believe this is a fine trade-off in this party." He gestured around at the other heirs, specifically at Arl, Sarah, and Nathan. Arl was checking his new pistols for grit as he spoke agreeably. "Makes sense. Kia's the primary melee powerhouse of the Guardians. For us, that's me and Nathan. But we've got one Stella to their Dalo and Kullal." Sarah looked at her brother with raised eyebrows. "A little early in the dungeon to compare ourselves to the Guardians, isn't it?" A smile spread across Stella's face. "Our aim is higher still. If we weren't staying sneaky, I'd cast a lightning bolt to the sky. This is good. I focus on destruction while you handle defense, Kache. My new class development will let me unleash a true maelstrom on our foes." "Care to share?" Nathan asked. Stella stood, pacing around the camp as she spoke, unable to keep still from excitement. "I am now a mage of the natural law, the first-class skill I've already mentioned. Natural magic will make my spells more powerful and harder to counter when they're aligned with the natural laws of the world. For instance, if I cast lightning by setting up a charge differential and guiding the flow with magnetic fields, the spell will be more powerful than if I just throw lightning mana around like most mages do." She paused in her stride, wincing slightly at Nathan. "It will also move it half a step from the magical into the natural world, making the effect harder to block and probably circumventing your magic immunity a bit. But you'll be able to control if it happens or not, right?" Nathan said. "So you cannot use that ability when you're catching me in the area of effect, right?" She nodded, biting her lip. "Yes, but I'll need to practice both ways with every spell." Nathan waved a hand to brush the issue aside. "I'm in favor of things that make your magic more powerful, and this is a downside we can work around. We can test it later. What else?" Stella resumed her pacing, raising a hand to conjure a force construct that danced with lightning and sparkled with motes of light. "Next, kaleidoscopic mana. It makes it easier for me to cast spells with multiple mana types without them interacting badly. Such a skill is an important prerequisite to many spells, especially for mages with a broad range of mana types." She grinned broadly. "And the last is multicasting. A skill I've wanted since my mother told me of it, which helps me cast multiple spells at once." She spun in place, throwing her arms wide. "All of the skills improve my spellcasting, and I didn't get any new mana types, but it would be a waste of skills to learn mana types from them, especially when I can get their insights from Nathan." The heirs all smiled at her enthusiasm. It was good to know their mage was getting even more powerful, but she wasn't done. "And my other skills developed. Mana channeling became mana torrent, so I can shove mana even faster into spells, and worldly mana improved too, granting an even higher mana regeneration rate." Stella rubbed her hands together. "A normal mage would need to be at level 243 or even 729 to have so many general class skills to facilitate better spellcasting. But I have them all now, and few limits to the number of spells I can cast. Just the channeling rate, and that's already high." During Stella's rant, Arl had pulled out a preserved sausage and started toasting it over the magical flames. He bit in and chewed on it, looking around the fire. "Well and good. Let us find another fight to level Nathan to 81. Are there any new jobs for us? Stella, have you heard from the guild? I haven't sent them anything, she said, frowning. I'll mention we killed a terrorghast and ask if there's anything in the area. She sat down and took up her now familiar, I'm concentrating on using message, face. Sarah glanced over at her brother. What kind of task would we prefer? I'd hunt a dangerous monster. Arl gave her a wry look. I doubt Nathan would level that way. Did you level at all from the terrorghast? She shook her head, acknowledging his point. I wish to protect a village from a foe, Kachai rumbled. My magic will be more potent when used in direct defense, and I would like to test it. Nathan, what is your suggestion? Nathan gave it a moment of thought, recalling his reflections from his watch earlier that morning. I would like to fight something hand-to-hand. I want to get class skills that help me when I fight foes who don't use magic, or who are physically powerful regardless. I didn't feel like I could have seriously injured the terrorghast, and without the spear, I don't have a weapon to fight something like that. Stella's face lit up with excitement. Tomorrow is a delve day, she announced, relaying the news. We should go delving. Everybody looked askance at that. Sarah spoke up questioningly. It is. Would they even let us delve a dungeon? Stella shrugged. That's what Siltal said. Do we want to do one? If we tell him that we're over 81, he'd likely approve us for a smaller dungeon if there are any around here. We're far enough out that there should be something. I'd like to see a true dungeon, Nathan said with excitement. Something a little more involved than the necromancer magelord's tomb. We're a little far from some of the dungeons we've seen earlier, and they're not quite so common around here. I suppose the guild will probably assign us one. Kachai spoke up agreeably. Indeed, if there is one that is appropriate. Stella, can you ask? She nodded and cast message once more. Sarah frowned. A dungeon would be at close range. With this weapon and class, I would prefer to stay at distance from any foes we face. Arl clapped her on the shoulder. Come, sister, don't be so picky. We'll need to fight in many circumstances, and experience with a dungeon delve will be useful, and it will definitely level Nathan up past 81. If we survive, he said that last part cheerily, as if daring anybody to disagree. I think Siltal was just waiting for us to ask, Stella piped up, having received a reply. He knew where we were from us being with the Dust Eaters. There's a dungeon south of Cromer that we're being directed to. It's an Adrani Empire defense outpost, and its magical artillery restricts the grazing grounds. Every now and then, a goat wanders too close and gets vaporized. Nathan blinked. Magical what now? He cast back in his memory for what he'd learned of Adrani dungeons. The Adrani Empire had been very skilled with enchanting and magic, not so much as the Kali's conclave, but their relics were a bit less weird and a bit more useful. They'd made up for any lack of sophistication with the scale of their projects, and were fond of magical traps and summoned guardians. They'd also been quite good at magical emplacements. One of the more common types of dungeons around Gemor were Adrani defense outposts, which were usually built around a powerful ranged magic well suited to the local environment. After all, the defense outposts had been intended to control the countryside for miles around, being defensible while manned with only 1 or 2 people. That meant they had many automatic defenses like traps or triggers that conjured a battalion of magical guardians, and that their ranged magic could fire autonomously at anything that got too close. I am surprised we are being trusted with this, Kachai said. If this delve goes wrong, the outpost could decide to target Cromer. We will need to ensure that does not happen. Arl began to pack up the camp. We know we were being favored already. This would be much more political if we were in Gemor, but out here there's nobody to argue. Everybody wants to do this, right? After a round of nods, the heirs set off, following Kachai's excellent sense of direction and the instructions Stella had been sent. It was time to go deal with a dungeon, and finally get past level 81. Chapter 29, But Why a Dungeon? The heirs spent the next day jogging over the desert-like terrain. They saw some evidence of the way that the villages here supported themselves. Beyond quarrying clay and mining various ores, they also herded livestock. The goats that Nathan saw from a distance weren't normal goats. They were even more demonic. 4 horned, strange hourglass-shaped eyes, and hair so wild it looked like it could strangle a woodchipper. Not hourglass-shaped pupils, hourglass-shaped eyes. Why? Who designed that? Given the history of Davrar, probably some weird-ass mage from 1,000 years ago with a strange sense of aesthetics and too much capability with life magic. The heirs kept their eyes peeled for threats, but there wasn't much out here. There were scattered bushes and tough grasses spread across the hillsides, and the heirs hadn't seen any of the predators that were known to inhabit the region. I mean, we've fought some of the scarier ones. Ashblood cobras are up there, and a terrorghast is its own type of scary. They could have detoured slightly and gone to the town of Cromer, but they were still fine on food, especially because Arl had harvested a good deal of ashblood cobra meat. It was pretty heat-resistant, which made it hard to cook, but Stella could manage it, and it was very tasty. The heirs were more likely to run out of vegetables than meat, but they decided that replenishing on fresh vegetables wasn't worth the delay or risk of stopping at Cromer. After all, they had their destination, and a deadline to get there. At their current pace, they'd reach the dungeon by evening, and be ready to challenge it as soon as the guild announced the go-ahead in the morning. Once they got within sight of the dungeon, they could plan out their approach, which would be hard without an eye on the terrain. The heirs were practiced at keeping themselves entertained while traveling, talking about builds and various strategies they could try in the future. Nathan lamented that Slow Fall wasn't ranking up as quickly as he wanted, and then was roundly mocked for being disappointed that he'd gotten up a high-tier talent to rank 6 so quickly. Nathan protested his treatment. Yeah, but it's important. If I can develop that talent to unique, it'll change everything. Stella's tone was sarcastic. And I want to develop mana shaping to unique, which will also change everything. But that talent is so hard to rank up. Faster when I have more mana types. To hit every target on the range, can you give me any more? Give me a minute to think. Nathan furrowed his brow. The heirs kept theorycrafting while Nathan jogged along, deep in thought. Other than plasma, the obvious next steps would be particle theory, atoms and molecules, and the kinds of interactions between them. I'm not entirely sure I want to go there yet. It's kind of a slippery slope to nuclear stuff, and I want to think it through a bit more beforehand. What else is there? There are so many things I can teach Stella. Would I need to go through chemistry to get to biology? Probably. Well, maybe not. I could start with cells as the minimal unit and go from there. Bah, I feel like I'd need to talk about proteins to get anywhere. But I might be able to get her life mana or something, and that would be cool. Maybe wood, like that mage Kinvin back in Farfield used to control trees. Can I cast the net broader? I don't know much control theory, but it might help her make more stable spells. Maybe logic. I saw that magic can do computation with the crystal book. Maybe thermal laws or fluid dynamics. Nathan wasn't focusing on his surroundings, too preoccupied by plotting how he'd lay out the basic concepts of biology if he couldn't describe what a protein was. He was startled out of his reverie by the crack of Sarah's rifle. His head snapped up, searching for the threat. He saw the other heirs cheering Sarah as she lowered the rifle and took a quick bow. Nathan followed their gazes to the hill opposite, where a weird lizard was rolling down the slope, very much dead. It was about 25 feet long and 3 feet across, with 8 stubby legs that looked capable of propelling it at incredible speeds. Oh, it's a pseudoworm. Basically, a long crocodile that lives in the desert. And it looks like Sarah nailed it on the run. Damn, will I get a level from that? Nathan waited for a moment, joining his friends in congratulating Sarah on the 200-yard shot. Then he asked, Sarah, did you level from that? She shook her head. Nope, but I ranked up steady hand. It'll take more than a distant pseudoworm to give levels to a level 86 headshot gunslinger. Maybe if there were 5 of them and I dropped them all before they got close. And neither did I suppose it really wasn't much of a challenge or a threat. To her, much less to me. Well, at least the dungeon should push me over that line. Stella sighed in an exaggerated fashion. Well, you won the bet. I will learn this lesson now when the price is cheap. Now you get to ask Nathan questions about long shooting. Feels a little weird that they're betting on who gets to ask me questions. Also flattering. So instead of having to teach Stella biology, Nathan and Stella helped Sarah work through some calculations she hoped would help develop the far-shot talent. After some discussion of bullet drop, she became enamored with the idea of using it to shoot at targets outside her line of sight, calculating the bullet drop to arc a shot. Nathan just shook his head at the idea of shooting at something you couldn't see, but Sarah insisted it would work with her build. Eventually. Nightfall saw them making camp in the protection of a pile of boulders, too regularly spaced to be natural. Arl made sure they also erected tripwires in that direction, not trusting some of the gaps between the rocks to not contain random nocturnal monsters. The dungeon wasn't too far away, and they'd made good enough time to see it from afar before the sun had vanished from the sky. They'd also had time to backtrack to find a good campsite that was well out of line of sight from the Adrani fortification. Long-distance travel speed, surprisingly important to an adventurer. I still think dimensional bags are cheating. Their target looked like a small keep atop a tall hill. The first clue that there was something there was the wide valley around it full of churned earth. It wasn't a moonscape of craters but just rough, like the ground had been repeatedly turned over by a giant plow. The dungeon itself wasn't very impressive, basically 4 stubby towers about 50 feet tall sticking up from the crest of the hill, joined together by 30-foot-high walls. The stone was the same dusty tan as the ground. The small castle almost looked like a blocky continuation of the hill it stood on. There wasn't a trace of movement or any indication that it was more than an old castle. At least, until night fell. Then Nathan saw the subtle glow of enchantments traced over the walls. More lights shone from the central courtyard, painting the inner surfaces of the towers in shifting tones of blue, green, and purple. What's the goal? Seems like a thing to start with. Arl was cooking over Stella's fire and started off their discussion. Stella gestured with her hands in the direction of the dungeon. There is a dungeon, she said slowly, as if speaking to a child. There should not be a dungeon. When there is no dungeon, we're done. Seems simple enough. Sarah rolled her eyes. Yes, but how do we kill the dungeon? Do we need to disable every single enchantment in the mountain, or can we just take out the one that blows up anything that walks near the valley? Kachai cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. We are done when it no longer poses a threat to person or animal. It is preferred if we keep the structure intact, since Gemor may decide to use it in some manner, but that is not a requirement. Stella, could you crack the hill? Nathan asked. Make the hill collapse into the valley so there's no dungeon left. Maybe, the mage answered hesitantly. It would take a while. I would need to be close, and it wouldn't work if they stabilized the hill with magic. The Adrani did that a lot. You can't dig into an Adrani dungeon, especially the military ones. Stella sat deep in thought for a moment before she grinned wide, teeth flashing in the firelight. You did mention other insights, more destructive ones. Would that allow me to solve this problem? Nathan felt uncomfortable. I don't think I can teach any of that by tomorrow, and I haven't figured out how to explain it yet. We should talk about that, but later. I'm wondering if the right thing is just for me to stroll up and start breaking things. The Adrani are also fond of placing golems in their fortresses, Arl said. Their ideal outpost has fully automated defenses, removing all sources of mistakes. He arched an eyebrow. Do you want to fight a battalion of golems, Nathan? Nathan remembered Tial's golems and how they'd almost killed him when he'd first escaped the Archmage's tower. He'd leveled a lot since then, but didn't know if he wanted to fight dozens of animated statues. Nathan wasn't confident that his anti-magic could disenchant a bunch of golems before they smashed him to a bloody paste. Katja tried to keep them on track. How should we approach? Is there a way to outwit this enemy? I doubt it'll be simple, Nathan said. It's a high magic fortification intended to defend against high magic enemies. There's probably no obvious weakness like flying in, but our advantage is that it's unmanned and will respond systematically to the threat. There's nobody in there to make smart decisions, so if we can understand the rules it operates under, we can exploit them to take it apart. It'll be just like figuring out how a video game AI works, and then doing things that no conscious enemy would let you get away with. He continued explaining. That means we need to understand the rules. What attacks does it use? What are the targeting parameters? We should spend the first part of the delve tomorrow testing it out, probing the boundaries carefully. Luckily, I think I'm a prime candidate. If whatever it uses for detection can't see me, I can approach and scout it out. If it can, then hopefully I can test the defenses without too much risk. There were nods around the campfire. Sarah cracked a smile. So instead of throwing Nathan at the problem, we're all just going to sit on a hill and watch him get shot at by a magical castle. Sounds like a good morning. The heirs got up early the next morning, cutting short their exercises to reach the dungeon on time. They wanted to take advantage of the entire delve day for experimentation, and to hedge against it being called off like the last one had been. That was when the grave tangle had erupted from a monastery of Quaz, and almost road-killed Nathan and the adventurers escorting the rescued villagers back to Gemor. It was a good introduction to the heavy hitters of Gemor, though. A pretty formative moment for me on Davrar, seeing the kinds of things that high-level adventurers can accomplish. They stood atop the hill overlooking the valley that was dominated by their target. It was weird to look across at a small castle and think, I'm going to try to break that today, and know that you probably could. At least with some help from my friends. They waited for the go-ahead from Gemor before moving on the dungeon itself. Once they'd gotten it, Nathan got charged up on stamina by Stella and descended the hill. The rest of the heirs stayed behind, observing. Once they'd established the distance that the dungeon fired, they'd approach, ready to support Nathan if he should need it. Stella would also see if she could block whatever the attack the dungeon employed. Nathan reached flat ground and started marching across the pulverized pebbles that had replaced the larger rocks of the terrain. He kept his eyes fixed on the castle, watching for anything suspicious. That and notice were probably the only reason he saw the tiny blip of light fly up and over the walls, arcing towards him like a mortar shell. Nathan sidestepped, trying to throw off the targeting of the spell. It curved slightly to follow him, plummeting faster and faster. Nathan abruptly switched directions, rolling away from the impact point right before the orb impacted the ground where he'd been a moment before. It was a fairly small projectile, maybe the size of a tennis ball. But the explosion it produced was not small, sending Nathan tumbling with a burst of overpressure and teeth-rattling vibrations. The mana washed over him and was absorbed. He picked it apart in a now-familiar game to understand the spell. It's like a thermobaric bomb, an elaboration on a fireball that emphasizes the pressure wave and also includes sound mana to enhance the destructive effect. There's also something else in there, Dream, to help with targeting, I think. Is it tracking thoughts? Mid-tier Identify 9 achieved. That skill's advanced a lot. Much better at helping me figure out how spells work now. Nathan coughed as his lungs healed from the pressure wave. He got to his feet just in time to see another ball of light headed towards his position, seemingly launched as soon as it was obvious he'd survived the first one. He was standing on the edge of a fresh crater that stretched nearly 20 feet across. He looked up at the spell, then back towards the heirs standing on the slope of the hill. Time to test if the engage range and disengage range are different. So Nathan ran backwards, not towards the heirs, but diagonally, away from both the castle and his friends. He checked over his shoulder for the orb and dodged at the last moment, this time staggering only slightly under the edge of the blast wave. Mid-tier dodging footwork 9 achieved. Stamina, 898.90, still getting a fair amount of stamina from those explosions. It helps that I'm better at absorbing spells I understand, and I'm starting to understand this one better. He kept running, climbing back up the hill towards the heirs. He was definitely outside of the range from which the first spell had fired at him. Will it stop shooting, or have I offended it? One more spell was incoming, but it had likely been fired while Nathan was still on the flat surface. He sighed and prepared to dodge again. Suddenly, 3 layers of force shield appeared overhead, interposing themselves between Nathan and the oncoming spell. The orb elongated, becoming a spike that punched through the first layer of shield before detonating on the second. The first layer was gone and the second one badly cracked, but the third seemed untouched. The barriers vanished as Stella dismissed them. Nathan saw her frowning at the dungeon. Well, I'm glad to only serve as a target part-time. Nathan watched for another orb but didn't see anything come at him. He stepped just over the edge of the disturbed area, noting another faint spark of light springing up from the castle. He took a few steps back as it arced towards him and once more detonated against Stella's shields. Nathan felt a tiny wave of pressure and mana from the blast, but nothing to seriously inconvenience him. No more projectiles were incoming, so Nathan hiked back up to the heirs. Looks like the disturbed earth is the limit of the range, and it'll only shoot at anybody inside. Should we test multiple targets? I will follow, Kachai said. I wish to test my new defensive powers. Stella should come after me. They proceeded to test the power, accuracy, and limitations of the outpost. It did fire at Kachai as he followed Nathan out into the plain, but the cleric blocked the explosive spell with a shining dome of divine mana that barely rippled in the face of the blast. It didn't fire at Stella as she came within range, continuing to barrage Nathan and Kachai instead. Maybe it could only hit 2 targets at once. Nathan stepped out of the targeting zone, dodging his 6th explosion with yet another juke and roll. He really stretched out the roll and got entirely out of the blast radius. Mid-tier tumbling 7 achieved. Kachai and Stella were now both shelled, reinforcing the idea that it could only attack 2 targets. They backed out of the targeting area and the attack ceased. Nathan looked around. I've got a plan. Are we ready? Chapter 30 Dungeons are for suckers. Nathan explained his strategy to the heirs as they stood just outside the range of the dungeon's bombs. 3 groups. I'm first, then Stella stands behind me. We'll draw the fire. Sarah and Arl with Kachai behind since you don't have unlimited mana. Get closer, see if there are more defenses. If we can handle them, Stella throws me in and I disable what I can. I'll call for help if I need it. If at any point stuff gets too dangerous, we retreat and come up with a new plan. Learning new things is a victory. They set out, walking quickly across the blasted valley that surrounded the Adrani defense outpost that they were treating as a dungeon. After all, it does try to blow up anybody who comes within 3/4 of a mile or so. Their progress was steady, as Nathan continued to dodge and absorb blasts from the fortification. He quickly noticed the jittery feeling of being capped out on stamina and started moving excessively quickly, zipping from side to side to get a better feel for the tracking of the explosive spells. As he ran, he awakened his rage. This wasn't a foe he had personal animosity towards, but the excitement of running across cratered ground while under bombardment helped. His battle meditation also synergized, allowing Nathan to submerge himself in the thrill of the fight without losing his focus. I am looking forward to using my rage without it preventing complex reasoning. After all, I need to crack open an intricate enchantment up there. Sounds fun. As he got closer, the transit time for the orbs reduced, and the attacks became even more frequent. From the opposite hillside, Sarah pulled out her revolvers and started shooting at the orbs in a slow cadence. Only every other shot detonated an orb, but the reduction in attacks allowed Nathan and Stella to pick up speed and close the distance to the base of the hill. Nathan's constant dodging helped him partially avoid the next attack from the dungeon. There was no warning, just a spray of liquid that shot out from a suddenly glowing spout on the nearest tower as Nathan reached the slope up to the small castle. The liquid steamed even in the hot desert air, the edges of the spray catching Nathan with countless droplets of hissing liquid. It was a boiling hot acid which quickly ate into his clothes. I swear, I didn't have a reason to be pissed before, but now I am. My clothing budget rivals my food budget. Then a tiny dart of fire shot out from the spout, and Nathan learned that the acid was also flammable. It lit with a ravenous, greenish-blue flame that would have cooked Nathan if the whole effect hadn't been so magical. It didn't linger, burning out quickly and leaving him in the center of a patch of baked sand and sooty rock. Nathan shot a look behind him. Stella was swinging wide to avoid the blackened zone while she put up additional shields to protect her in case the tower decided to repeat the attack. He gestured up the slope and she gave him an affirmative hand sign. So he leaped up the hill. It wasn't the sort of slope that required climbing, but it was steep enough that going straight up would require you to stop and take a breather every dozen steps. Any trail climbing this hill would switch back up it, instead of going in a straight line. Sarah's shots rang out more quickly as the castle volleyed more spells at him, determined to blast Nathan down the slope with concussive force. He responded by sprinting straight at the castle, spending stamina to run as if he were on flat ground. He both pushed with his legs and used perfected body to replace his muscles' need for oxygen and respiration. Mid-tier sprinting 10 achieved. Congratulations, you have maxed out this utility skill. It cannot be improved any further. You must achieve insight into this skill to develop it to high tier. He dodged away from another jet of acid that could have bowled him back down the slope. After another moment it lit with a F-whoosh, the brightly colored light making it hard for Nathan to pick out his next dozen footsteps. He kicked a lip of rock and staggered, but managed to correct his balance just in time to catch another explosive ball of power that Sarah had missed. They're coming much faster now that I'm closer. Cycle time is shorter. If Nathan let the explosive go off in contact with his skin, it would probably blow him down the hill, mana absorption or not. So he caught the spell with both hands, cradling it and tearing apart the tightly bound mana that wanted to explode. It was a very clever assemblage of fire, force, and sound mana, with the dream mana tacked on as a guidance mechanism. He closed his hands together, containing and absorbing the explosive entirely. High-tier spell sense 7 achieved. Then he resumed his sprint up the hill, quickly approaching the base of the castle. Nathan wasn't sure what he would do once he got there, since the walls looked like 30 feet of impervious stone. He doubted he had enough momentum to bust through the wall. A rock ahead of Nathan wiggled suggestively, and he changed course to run towards it. He leapt atop the rock and it shot skywards under Stella's control, bolstering his leap. He soared up towards the fort, gaining height quickly as another explosive projectile detonated underneath him. A bubble of force appeared around Nathan, the spell shining a faint orange instead of the blue of Stella's 4 spells. It started constricting on him the moment it appeared, but Nathan crashed into the barrier headfirst and punched through it, shattering the spell. With antimagic momentum and Juggernaut's inertia, can't touch this. He spent stamina like water as he reached the top of his jump, flattening his arc significantly while retaining his horizontal movement. The motion jerked him out of the way of another orb, which zipped past his feet to detonate on the slope below. Then Nathan's legs slammed into the battlements, and he toppled onto the thin walkway that ran along the walls. He scrabbled to keep his footing and not fall into the central courtyard before he could look around. Damn it, no slow fall rank up. I need those. Looking left and right, Nathan saw metal golems filing out of the towers and stalking towards him from both directions with a lethal grace. They were composed entirely of sharp edges, and each looked like a ballet dancing robot built by somebody with a sword fetish. One of them took a rifle bullet to the chest, exploding in a cloud of shards that rained onto the central courtyard. An acid spout to the right started spraying its cargo downslope towards the airs, but the rock that had served as Nathan's jump assist slammed into the aperture at high speed. It didn't crack the magically reinforced tower, but it mostly blocked the weapon port and cut off the spray of dangerous liquid. Nathan's attention panned down into the courtyard of the castle, noting that half of the small space was taken up by a pair of enchanted stone and metal constructs that looked like radar dishes. One of them faced his direction, and he watched as it pulsed and sent a ball of explosive energy shooting towards him. Nathan danced to the side almost instinctively, the ball passing bare inches from his shoulder before flying over the wall. Mid-tier dodging footwork 10 achieved. Congratulations, you have maxed out this utility skill. It cannot be improved any further. You must achieve insight into this skill to develop it to high tier. In the center of the remaining space was a fancy staircase that led into the hill. However, two large metal golems guarded the opening. Their boxy bodies were the nexus for several magical cannons, and each had a multi-jointed, tail-like limb tipped by a heavy blade. The deadly construction was supported by 4 sturdy legs, and each golem looked like a heavy combat robot. High tier notice 2 achieved. His quick but thorough scan of the fortress complete, Nathan considered his options. He was under some rather restrictive time limitations. The sword ballerinas were closing in from both sides. If this place has a core, it's down that staircase. Do I go after it or dismantle the defenses on the outside first? The 4-legged golems were clearly in the middle of their activation sequence and were slowly getting to their feet. One was basically under Nathan, and he looked down at it. Screw it, jump it before it's ready. Need to rank up this slow fall somehow. So Nathan jumped off the wall, using his slow fall to slam both knees into the golem with as much force as he could. It was only a 20-foot fall, but Nathan fell as fast as he would after falling 4 times that height, and his knees hammered into the center of the golem's body with crushing force. High-tier slow fall 7 achieved. That's what I'm talking about. The impact of the blow was colossal, and one of his kneecaps dislocated. The golem was even worse off, staggering from the blow as Nathan's antimagic rippled through the metal. Cracks scythed through the magically animated body, and the golem collapsed against the wall with a ringing crash. Oh, that's interesting. Antimagic momentum really kicks in when I slam into an enchanted object with speed. His kneecap popped back into place before Nathan even hit the ground, and he turned his fall into a quick roll to avoid a blow from the tail of the other golem. A flamethrower-like cannon activated, bathing Nathan in flames hot enough that the stones underfoot started glowing. Fire mana is an old friend of mine. He twisted to the side, dodging a quick set of strikes from one of the golem's legs. His movements felt right, as if Nathan had finally acclimated to the increased speed and reaction time from all his enhancements. But no development appeared. The tail came around and Nathan leapt into the air, hovering for a second with slow fall as the limb swept underneath him. Metal fragments showered down from above as more of the smaller golems were blown off the wall by Sarah's bullets. Nathan dropped and hammered a palm driven by all of his body weight into one of the golem's leg joints. It snapped out of orientation and the golem struggled for balance, tilting to aim another cannon at Nathan. A spike of darkness shot out, crossing the distance faster than thought. The effect was like an overcharged disintegrate, and hit him squarely in the chest. But a disintegrate from an archmage of Giant's Rest had barely tickled. This spell had more juice behind it, but Nathan's talent and understanding of the spell trumped raw power. The spell danced over his skin and finished off what remained of Nathan's clothes, but achieved little else beyond exfoliation. Nathan was about to retaliate when he saw enchanted spikes rising from the four towers, each crackling with lightning. Magic flowed into a point above the courtyard, quickly growing into an enormous ball of lightning. Then the spell dented inwards as a magnetic spell from outside the castle wall punched into it. The ball of lightning pulsed wildly for a moment before destabilizing completely. Uncontrolled lightning lashed the dungeon, shattering the smaller golems and sending the bigger one jerking away just as it recovered its footing from Nathan's blow. Thanks, Stella. Nathan closed the distance to the last golem, ripping off another leg by bracing the joint over his hip and wrenching the limb sideways. He proceeded to hammer the central torso of the golem into scrap with his fists, putting the strength and momentum of his entire body behind each blow. It felt strange but extraordinarily satisfying to feel the intricate metal shatter under his hands, like there was no barrier in the world that could stop his rage-born strength. I think it's heavily magically enhanced, and I'm canceling all of that out, but I'm definitely also hitting like a goddamn truck. Rage, an enhanced body, and Juggernaut's inertia are all combining damned nicely, and I'm getting confident in it. Nathan looked around the courtyard again. More of the sword-dancing golems were emerging from small doors in the base of each tower. I can stay here and fight, disable the defenses and wait for the heirs to catch up, or I can just get downstairs and see if I can break something important before the dungeon can fully escalate. Seems like an easy decision. Nathan sprinted for the staircase, bolting down the stone steps. The double door at the bottom was elegantly inlaid with metal that gleamed with a subdued orange glow. Nathan put down his shoulder and pitted his momentum against the door. He won. The door was magically reinforced, and a barrier tried to disintegrate him on contact. But it didn't even slow Nathan down, and he busted through the door, shattering an enchanted bar into a spray of fragments. Beyond was a long corridor. Nathan pelted down it and ran face first into an array of traps. Luckily, Nathan had noticed the array of slits, spouts, and enchanted protrusions along the hallway walls, and threw himself into a floor-hugging slide before he got 10 feet into the corridor. A giant enchanted bolt fired down the length of the hallway, leaving a wake of disruptive force before shattering into a hail of shrapnel that pelted the stairs outside. A half-dozen other mana types followed it, bathing the hallway in a destructive chaos whose complexity pushed Nathan's ability to absorb known spells. Magic Absorption 9 achieved. I'm surprised the hallway survived that. Not complaining, though. Then Nathan saw that the stones of the hallway were all enchanted, and that those enchantments were increasing in intensity. Shapes started coalescing in the corridor, ghostly bodies forming from energy projected from the stones. Nathan kicked himself to his feet, sticking his arm into one of the forming constructs. The body wasn't entirely ghostly, and Nathan's hand punched through a barrier and into a complex weave of magic. The mana already dissipating around his grasping hand felt almost divine, but not quite. Spiritual mana, something to supplement and guide a framework of force. A blade of force mana cut along his back, scoring his skin but failing to leave more than a faint scrape. Nathan looked up at the phalanx of ethereal warriors blocking his path and cracked his knuckles. Then he waded in. These warriors were unquestionably more skilled than he was. They evaded his punches with impressive grace, striking with precise and powerful blows that should have crippled and killed. but their weapons, made of force mana, failed to do more than scratch his skin. You know, this seems like a great place to get that skill rank up. Let's not get hit. Nathan darted into the center of the enemies and started trying to dodge every attack sent his way. The ghostly guardians didn't switch up tactics, but continued to strike at him even after it was clear they couldn't significantly wound him. Nathan pushed himself harder, tuning his reactions to dodge multiple attacks coming at him from all directions. It was the kind of intense training environment that would have been nearly impossible to replicate, and Nathan leaned on notice and battle meditation to keep up with all the information he needed to process. He lost track a few times and took flurries of blows, but every time he lashed out to clear some space to reset and heal, then tuned back into a focused state where he could keep up with all of the attacks coming his way. Battle Meditation 3 achieved. Congratulations, you have developed the mid-tier dodging footwork, utility skill into high-tier dodging footwork. Utility skill, high-tier dodging footwork. This skill will help you with quick movements to keep your balance and dodge attacks. Nathan was reminded by a rather large explosion that there was a battle going on and that his friends were waiting for him to do a job. So he switched to offense. While the spirits dodged with impeccable grace, he only needed to grab or kick them once to cripple them, literally absorbing their flesh. I could probably just bull through the whole lot. There's not much they can do to stop me. As the spiritual warriors reformed at the end of the corridor, Nathan narrowed his eyes. He sprinted down the hall, passing bodily through nearly a dozen of the ephemeral figures to make his way further into the dungeon. Thank you for listening to the story on KevinAudio.com. Chapter 31. Post-dungeon hangovers. Nathan quickly reached the end of the hallway, taking in the doors on either side and wondering which to open. Both were made of metal inlaid wood, but while one was fancy, the other looked secure. He stepped towards the fancy door, finding that it opened with a gentle touch. Beyond was a wide-open living space, sumptuously decorated but uninhabited. He panned his eyes quickly over couches, a kitchen, and an empty pool before shaking his head and turning around. Okay, that looks like a luxury suite. Let's see what's through door number 2. He pivoted to the other door and busted through its enchanted lock with a slight run-up, emerging into what looked like a spaceship engineering room. There were panels all around covered with displays, indicators, and controls. Screens at the front displayed images of the heirs, who had hunkered against the base of one of the walls. They were protected by layered barriers of force and divine mana that were under continual attack by a variety of spells and weapons carried by the sword golems. It was hard to tell, but it appeared Arl was slowly battering his way through the walls with an enchanted pickaxe. There's probably a kill switch somewhere around here, but I don't know where it is and what fail-safes are on it. I'd also probably break the controls trying to hit it. Beyond the screens, where the reactor would have sat if this was a sci-fi show, was a 5-foot-tall crystal. It looked like a large piece of unworked gypsum, but internal refractions revealed a complex internal structure, and it blazed with magical power. Glowing enchantments around it siphoned away magical power to power the castle's defenses. Why is it always a crystal? You'd think there'd be a dungeon with a magical plant as a power source or something. I guess there was that one dungeon where a giant snake statue was the power source, so never mind. Regardless, Nathan hopped a safety barrier and dropped into the pit in which the crystal sat. He was ready for one final threat, one last challenge. But nothing happened. He just walked up to the crystal and examined it. There's gotta be enough mana in there to power a city for a month. Just being close to it is raising the hair on my arms. I could try to depower it, but that would take a while and might actually make me explode from stamina overload. Maybe I'd better cut it off from the rest of the network. Let me check for self-destructs first. There's enough magical power here to vaporize this hill at the least, maybe even hit the nearby villages. Nathan spent a moment looking over the connections into the crystal and searching for potential traps or self-destructs. It wasn't something he could have done unaided, but the combination of notice, identify, spell sense, and enhanced memory helped him pick apart some of what was going on in the giant construct. A lot of it was a dedicated mana siphon, a complex knot of flowing mana that Nathan could feel from several feet away. It sucked in ambient mana, allowing the crystal to recharge. Mid-tier Identify 10 achieved. Congratulations, you have maxed out this utility skill. It cannot be improved any further. You must achieve insight into this skill to develop it to high tier. Doubt it's recharging faster than this stronghold is spending mana trying to kill my friends. Nathan shook his head and focused on what was important. It only took him a handful of seconds to definitively identify all of the enchanted conduits that fed magic into the rest of the fortress. Each channel carried a different mana type, matching the ones Nathan had seen outside. Force, fire, sound, void, metal, acid, and many more. High-tier spell sense 8 achieved. It's like an artificial mage in a lot of ways. A mana pool that recharges and has different mana types. Incredible, but I am expecting a self-destruct and haven't found it yet. That makes me nervous. He spent another minute studying the crystal, intensely aware of the sounds of explosions outside. The airs will be fine. Both Stella and Kachai can shield them now. The fact that the sounds are still going means they're fine. But they won't be fine if I let my rage or impatience dictate my actions and let this crystal detonate. After a moment, Nathan realized he should be looking for parts of the crystalline growth that were inactive places where he couldn't currently feel a significant quantity of mana flowing. The self-destruct wasn't currently in use, after all. He touched each inactive section gently, getting the feel for how the traces of mana left behind siphoned into his hands. His Identify helped greatly, giving him clues for what each module was for. This one seemed like a communication nexus, while that one was some kind of mana conversion system that wasn't currently active. But the third one reminded Nathan of the crystal spellbook. Specifically, it reminded him of the self-destruct spell that had left a large crater in the bank of the Drakefish River. It seemed built to compress mana down to incredible densities, while instilling a complex layer or magic that Nathan didn't try to understand. But the real nail in the coffin was that this section of the crystal was cursed, though it was subtle enough that Nathan would have missed it without his experience using his Antimagic to break cursed items. Congratulations, you have developed the mid-tier Identify utility skill into high-tier Identify. Utility skill, high-tier Identify. This skill will help you interpret complex cues to understand strange objects, curses, and effects, as well as give you clues on how to manipulate them. Will not help you identify types of mana or spellcraft. The curse activated at his touch, and the self-destruct started filling with mana, building up to detonation. It was fast and would have only taken a few seconds to complete the process. Nathan didn't give it that time. He jerked into motion and snapped off the cursed portion of crystal before crushing it to powder beneath his fingers. Most of the mana was absorbed into his hands, but what remained reacted wildly. Nathan spun around, putting the bulk of his body in between the unstable mana and the magical reactor. The leftover mana flared, and Nathan braced himself as it lashed out, doing nothing so clean as a simple explosion. He almost slid back into the crystal, but held his ground as tendrils of wild magic scourged the inside of the control room. More grounded themselves against Nathan's chest, and he once more felt his stamina overload. Well, that's nice. But I still need to disconnect the crystal from the rest of the fortress so it stops barraging my friends with military-grade explosive magic. Nathan let the crushed chunks of inert crystal fall to the ground as he examined the rest of the room. He struck quickly, disabling the various connections he'd already scoped out. It was simple work, merely a series of powerful stomps atop each of the mana conduits. After he finished, Nathan spun towards the giant crystal. Both of the inactive portions he'd avoided breaking before were now active, the mana conversion and long-distance communication modules. A spell similar to disintegration swept out from the mana conversion system, and he had no idea what the communication module was doing. Uh-oh, should have seen that coming. Maybe I should have broken those before moving on the conduits. What is my priority? Not waking up something that'll eat a village, I think. Nathan made his choice quickly, smashing the chunk of crystal that was probably casting some equivalent of message, before moving around to the source of the disintegration spell that was steadily consuming what remained of the magical reactor. The disintegration spell was tricky. It was a self-propagating spell that fed off the mana contained in the crystal to keep itself going. When he disabled a region of the spell, it tried to disintegrate him, but the spell quickly burnt out and was absorbed. However, the tide of destruction advancing through the crystal was insidious, and Nathan couldn't tamp it down quickly enough to halt the spread. It was only by ripping off chunks and using his Antimagic to nullify the disintegration effect on each piece individually that Nathan saved some pieces of the original monolithic construct. Now that's some aggressive DRM. I can't dispute its effectiveness, though. Then it was done. He had been tossing the crystalline chunks aside after he'd finished decontaminating them, and they were scattered around the edges of the room and in the control area. The magical lights in the underground room stayed on, but the displays were flickering out and dying as the dungeon lost power. The explosions from outside were also becoming weaker and more sporadic. Nathan stuck his head out the door, cautiously looking around to see if there were more of the spiritual guardians outside. They remained, facing away from him and faithfully guarding the staircase leading up into the courtyard. As he watched, the enchanted stones powering the constructs dimmed, and the ghostly soldiers decohered, losing substance and reality until no trace remained. Nathan scooched around the corner, surreptitiously eyeing the slot in the back wall that had unleashed the giant ballista bolt earlier. Nothing happened, and he walked upstairs to see what was going on with the rest of the heirs, relinquishing his rage as he went. The fight felt over. His friends were in the process of squeezing through a hole in the wall that looked melted, as if a giant blowtorch had burned its way through the stone. They looked unhurt and whole as Arl reached back to haul Kache through the tight gap. I haven't leveled up yet, but I'm pretty damn sure I will after this is over. That means there's still a threat. Nathan called out to be sure. All good. See any additional threats? Sarah responded, looking around the fortress with both revolvers drawn. We're hail. Everything stopped a moment ago. Was that you? Nathan grunted in the affirmative before elaborating. Yup, broke a big crystal downstairs. He kept his head on a swivel, examining the inert magical constructs around him for any additional threats. A faint tink of metal on stone sounded from above. Sarah snapped her pistols up and let off a quick fusillade of shots above Nathan's head. He jumped sideways but failed to avoid the cascade of sharp metal that fell on him. It bounced off his skin in a series of distracting impacts, clattering against the stone of the courtyard. He looked at Sarah in confusion. She shrugged. Few of the sword golems tried to jump on you. Nathan had other things drawing his attention. You have leveled up to level 81. Congratulations, you and your team have destroyed a fully functional nodal defense outpost of the Edrani Empire without casualties. Please choose a developed class from the following list to continue leveling, as you have unlocked a level higher than 81. Potential classes: Woundless Berserker. You have repeatedly fought through extreme and lethal wounds to defeat your foes while raging. This class will enhance your physical durability and allow you to survive nearly any wound. Additional skills will enhance the power and intensity of your rage and enable you to exert tremendous strength at the cost of damaging yourself. This class may further develop into classes focused on immortality, endless rage, or transforming forms while raging. With this class, you will be nearly impossible to kill. Mana-drinker Einherjar, you have dedicated yourself to a cause, consuming oceans of mana to sustain your fighting style. This class will enhance your ability to use stamina to boost your efforts while raging, along with increasing the amount of stamina you receive from absorbing magic, and giving you skill with a wide array of weapons, especially while raging. This class may further develop into classes focused on mastering a diverse array of weapons, limited divine magic, or fighting extraordinary numbers of enemies. With this class, you will become an army of one. Magic Sunder Siegebreaker. You have broken magical fortifications and destroyed immensely dangerous magical artifacts. This class will enable you to break enchanted objects with the smallest touch, and greatly increase your abilities to shatter solid fortifications. You will also gain supremely enhanced durability while raging and the momentum of a battering ram. This class may further develop into classes focused on destroying magical effects in an area, breaking city-scale enchantments, or incredible overwhelming strength. With this class, you will become a human battering ram capable of breaching any fortification, enchanted or not. Implacable Antimage. You cannot be slowed by magic, and use your agility to overcome physical threats. This class will enhance your anti-magic while raging, making you truly immune to magic and its effects. It will also enhance your physical agility and increase your proficiency in hand-to-hand combat. This class may further develop into classes focused on permanently draining people of their magic, deflecting or controlling hostile magic, or excelling at close-quarters combat. With this class, you will become an unstoppable mage hunter. Nathan was interrupted from his consideration of his new class options by a bundle of fabric hitting him in the chest, which he reflexively caught. He blinked away the notification to find Arl looking at him, cocking an eyebrow. His gaze flicked down, taking in Nathan's nakedness. I completely forgot I was buck-ass naked storming the control room of the fortress. He turned around to spare his friends the full frontal, hurrying to pull on the fresh pair of pants. Arl's voice sounded across the courtyard. "Did you hit 81? Nathan nodded, glad to have a topic at hand. "Yup. Was just looking over the options. Some of them look pretty good. I'm excited about the variety." Stella frowned at the debris of golems littering the inside of the fortress. "What was downstairs? Anything magical left now that you've killed the problem?" She looked suspicious and ready to be disappointed. Nathan grinned. "Actually, I think we might want to stay here for a couple of days, and I do have a present for you, Stella." He pushed his excitement over his new class choices to the back of his mind. There was cleanup to do first. She perked up at his words, hurrying to approach the steps. Nathan held out a hand. "Let me go make sure all the traps are disabled. Some of them were pretty nasty." He walked down the steps, not expecting any problems. There weren't any. He led the heirs through the hallway and down to the double doors. First, he gestured them into the now-defunct control room, where Stella went feral over the chunks of crystal Nathan had left scattered around the room. The other heirs watched as she practically vacuumed them up, and Nathan blinked in surprise as she rubbed one of the larger chunks against her face, clearly basking in the feeling from the material. Then she looked at the shattered base that the large crystal had occupied and up at the ceiling, frowning. "How much more was there?" she asked. "It looks like the crystal was much bigger. How much did you destroy?" Her voice started soft but quickly grew angry. Nathan shrugged, not feeling the least bit guilty. "I saved maybe a tenth of it. It tried to self-destruct. I think it would have blown up the entire hill at least. I disabled that, but there were two other failsafes. One was a message of some kind, the other was a self-disintegration spell. I prioritized interrupting the message since I didn't want it to wake a giant mecha. Stella rocked her head back from side to side, letting out a pained moan at Nathan's words. This is artificial prismatic diamond. It's not as good as natural, but there is so much. With what's here, we could buy my parents' house. She traced the socket where the crystal had stood, outlining its approximate shape. A piece that big would be literally without price. The guild would have let us pick our reward from anything we could name. You could make whole swords out of it. I don't have the heart to tell her it was a few feet taller than she thinks it was. Kachai stepped forward, calmly placing a hand on Stella's shoulder. Those crystals have never been captured. We are very lucky Nathan saved as much as he did. Take the gift we are given, Stella, and do not be greedy for more. That way leads to sloppy risks and unfortunate deaths. Stella pouted but took a deep breath. She nodded regretfully. Yeah, you're right. I need higher quality mana storage, and this is perfect, but I wish there were more. Arl looked around with raised eyebrows. Glad Stella got something. Any swords around? I only saw the sword golems, and those have a bit too much attitude for my hands. The heirs all chuckled. I didn't explore the other side. There might be something over there. Nathan provided. It looked nice. I'd vote to stay here for a little while. Lead the way, Sarah said. I'd prefer that our magic-immune party member trigger any leftover traps. Nathan went first through the other door into the living area buried beneath the dungeon. He had only given the room a quick glance earlier, but it had reminded him of a luxury penthouse, with a wide-open floor plan that featured several couches, a large kitchen, and a pool in a recessed area of the floor. Now he walked into the room again, expecting to find the whole place dusty and in disrepair. He could buy that enchantments had kept the fortress operational and the control room intact, but could it keep a couch in good shape? Nathan flopped onto one of the couches, half expecting it to collapse under his weight. Instead, he settled into a wonderfully comfortable seat with just the right amount of give. He luxuriated for a moment before realizing that the cushions were enchanted, and he was about to break that enchantment. Oh, come on. A goddamn enchanted couch. He got up before he really did disintegrate the comfortable seating, though where he'd sat was probably not as springy anymore. Grumpy, Nathan prowled around the space while the heirs nervously watched from the door to see if he was about to blow up. Nathan checked the kitchen, finding only empty cupboards. The pool was dry as a bone. There were 2 doors leading out of the space. One was tucked away in a corner near the door that led out into the hallway with the heirs, while the other led deeper underground. Nathan walked over to the door near the heirs, noting that it was locked with an obvious and heavy-duty enchantment. He carefully placed a finger on the very edge of the enchantment, slowly draining it dry to avoid a violent breakage that might trigger a self-destruct. These ancient dungeons are really too heavily seeded with things that go boom. What kind of sane architect designs this many different ways for their buildings to explode? The heirs scooted over to see what he was doing, taking a few steps into the room. Nathan waved them in. I think that most of the traps depended on the crystal for power. Besides, would you want hair-trigger traps in your living room? The heirs were still careful, and Stella put up a few panes of force to protect them from any surprise traps. I should remember that not everybody can just take a fireball to the face and laugh it off. Oh man, my new class choices are exciting. All of them seem pretty great. When the security enchantment was drained, Nathan gently pushed open the door and stepped into a small armory. It was obviously only supposed to equip 1 or 2 people, with a pair of armor stands taking up the middle of the room. Only one was occupied, bearing a tight-fitting suit made entirely of woven metal. It was covered with symbols made by patterns of metal strands, and it oozed legendary armor vibes. However, the racks of weapons and assorted items on the walls were just as impressive, even if there were a number of empty places where things were missing. Nathan turned to look back at the heirs, eyebrow cocked. Well, there's loot, sweet, sweet loot. Chapter 32, A Den of Comfort. Arl was the first through the door, gazing around at the armory with delight in his eyes. He reached his hand toward a wide-bladed greatsword that dominated the back wall, but Sarah firmly grasped his shoulders and pulled him back. "Curses," she admonished, clearly disappointed in her brother. "You know better," he hung his head. "Yeah, that just looks like one of Dad's, you know the one. It can cut through anything." Sarah followed his gaze to the sword. "It does, but we don't know if it's safe." Nathan stepped forward. "Luckily, you've got somebody who can check for curses and break them if need be." He grasped the sword, hefting it off the stand with one hand. It was heavy, even for him, with a blade nearly 9 inches wide across at the base that slowly narrowed along its 8-foot length. It was the kind of sword that required skills or magic to wield effectively. And despite the lack of visible enchantments on the blade, there was definitely magic in this sword. Nathan felt some kind of identity-probing magic activate, but he was already analyzing it with his new high-tier identify, aided by his spell sense. "Okay, so there wasn't a self-destruct on the door, but there is one on this sword." "Really? It looks like it'll turn whatever the blade's enchantment on itself, making it consume itself in the next few seconds. Unless I—" Nathan jabbed his other hand out, tapping the hilt of the sword right above the crossguard. The blow carried his antimagic and broke the active connection between the hilt and the rest of the blade. Then, focusing his antimagic as much as he could, he disabled the self-identification spell while trying to avoid damaging the other enchantments in the weapon. He held onto the sword for a moment longer, risking damage in order to sort through the other enchantments and make sure he hadn't missed anything dangerous. Nathan parsed a few momentum enchantments that seemed geared towards making the enormous sword easier to swing while hitting harder. There was also a mass enchantment on the far end of the blade that kept the ridiculously sized sword balanced, but by far the most complicated enchantment was woven into the metal crystals of the blade's edge. It included force, void, shadow, and metal mana, almost like a variant of a disintegrate that also applied prying force. "I've gotten a lot better at identify. It's a good skill to have, and this is a pretty damned cool sword." Nathan tossed the sword to Arl, grinning. "Be careful with that. I think the edges have an invisibly thin disintegration effect going on." Arl caught the sword carefully by the hilt, inspecting it with bemused wonder. "Dragon's breath," he said in an amazed whisper. Nathan went through the rest of the items in the room, checking each for curses with a quick touch. About 2/3 were cursed in some way, but Nathan managed to clear most without damaging the underlying item. His identify was crucial, helping him figure out the curses and purge them quickly enough that he didn't inadvertently destroy the enchantments that made each piece of loot useful. He let the heirs take their pick. Stella claimed a few wands and a staff, while Kachai took a sturdy hammer enchanted to deform metal with every blow. Sarah didn't take much, just a couple of daggers and a javelin whose head expanded into a wide wedge of force mana after being thrown. She looked it over, sighing. "Just a few months ago, I would have been happy with this weapon, but now my future is somewhere else, and something tells me we're not about to find a gun down here." Nathan shrugged, approaching the armor in the center of the room. He'd ignored it so far, wanting to deal with the largest enchanted item in the room last. "You know, in case it explodes or something. I've never uncursed a suit of armor before." He gestured the heirs out of the room, then laid his hands on the woven metal of the armor, lifting it slightly from the rack. Metal filaments probed out from the armor, questing over his hands and up his arms. Nathan immediately pulled his hands away. Some of the metal filaments had been drained of magic, and they snapped off and clattered to the floor. Whoops. I don't think that was an attack. I don't think the armor is cursed at all. Just weird. High-tier identify 2 achieved. That seems like a good sign, but I'm not trusting one of my friends lives to it. Not unless I need to. He took a few more quick pokes at the outfit to see if he could glean any more information. There was no instant attack or even an identity check. It just tried to crawl over his body, though the enchantments were complicated enough that Nathan couldn't be sure it wouldn't wait until after somebody had put it on all the way, and then decide to eviscerate them. Nathan turned to the door. "I'm sure about the armor. I'm pretty sure it's not cursed, but not sure enough to trust a life to it. Let's toss it in the quarantine sack and get it checked out later." Arl threw the whole rack in, grumbling about wanting better armor to go with his new weapons. Sarah poked him in the side. "Remember that we'd have to wait to go back to Gemor before we could use any of this without Nathan." She turned and addressed Nathan. "I want to see what's past the other door. Take the front, trap target." Nathan cast one last look around the armory room, searching for any indications of a secret vault or door. There was nothing, and so he walked back into the wide living area and across to the far door. It opened into another short hallway with a few doors spread along its length. The first was a bathroom, one much more similar to Earth's idea of a toilet than Gemor's standard. It also held a large shower, and Nathan was excited about the idea of staying somewhere with advanced magical plumbing. Then his hopes fell. "Hell, both the toilet and the shower are heavily enchanted. I probably need to crap outside. Would be pretty rude of me to break the bathroom." The next door revealed a strange room that took Nathan several seconds to identify. "Well, I'll be damned. It's for laundry, washer and dryer, even if they clearly work off magic. Wait, do they still work now that I've broken the crystal?" Nathan walked over and poked the washer, feeling out the magic inside without breaking it into pieces. There were traces of magic in the device, but clearly not enough to function. His suspicions aroused, Nathan walked back to the bathroom and tapped the toilet. It was similarly dead. "Well, I guess we're all crapping outside. Still, this place is nice." The last two doors in the hallway opened onto a pair of luxurious bedrooms, each large enough for 3 people to sleep without having to be particularly friendly. Nathan turned back to the heirs. "I want to chill somewhere for a little while I think about my level 81 development. Can we stay here for a few days?" Kachai nodded in response, looking at the bed with longing. "It would be nice to sleep with a roof overhead." He gestured to Stella. "We should tell Gemor that this dungeon is cleared, the core destroyed, and the armory looted. Do not mention that we intend to stay here for some time." Stella rolling her eyes at Kachai. "No need to teach a mage to light a fire. Not many would stay in a freshly cleared dungeon, but we're pretty sure this one holds no more dangers, right?" She cocked her head in Nathan's direction. "I'm pretty sure." "I'll poke my head around a bit more, make sure I've covered everything." The heirs started settling into the suite as Nathan scoured it for traps, finally pronouncing the place clean after another hour of going over every inch of the place. Most of the luxuries weren't working because of the lack of a magical power source. The pool wouldn't fill or heat itself, the stove wouldn't light, and none of the mysterious appliances seemed to do anything. The place was entirely empty of food, even with a pantry enchanted to hold everything inside in stasis. Arl grumbled, but had Stella start a magical fire in the oven regardless to prepare their meal. The cooks bickered over how to use the mostly inactive kitchen, while Sarah sat down and started whittling on a piece of wood she'd picked up from the destroyed control room. Kachai wandered over to chat with her, leaving Nathan mostly alone to think. He decided he would sacrifice the magic in one particular loveseat for his own comfort, flopping down in the cushy chair. It conformed to his body for 15 seconds or so before the magic failed, locking the couch in the shape of Nathan's butt. And while it wasn't a magical chair anymore, it was still the comfiest chair Nathan had sat in maybe since Earth. Neither Gemor nor Giant's Rest were particularly advanced in the Tao of the sofa. But now it was time for Nathan to think about his class developments. After all, I have time now. If I wait, Davrar will spring something nasty and I'll have to make this decision in the middle of a fight to make sure we win. Nathan pulled up his list of options once more, focusing on the last line of each description, which seemed to describe the overall ethos of each option. Potential classes: Woundless Berserker. With this class, you will be nearly impossible to kill. Manadrinker Einherjar. With this class, you will become an army of one. Magicsunder Siegebreaker. With this class, you will become a human battering ram capable of breaching any fortification, enchanted or not. Implacable Antimage. With this class, you will become an unstoppable mage hunter. His initial impressions towards all of the classes had been positive. They all seemed good in different ways. Woundless Berserker would remove one of his greatest weaknesses: overwhelming physical power. It would let him exert tremendous strength and make him nearly impossible to kill. That sounded great. It was also an enhancement to his rage and a Berserker class which he'd been warned off of earlier. But now he had battle meditation and was confident it would help him deal with any rage-related issues. After all, battle meditation didn't seem to tamper with or control Nathan's rage. He still felt as immersed in the thrill of battle and full of fury at his foes. What battle meditation did was let Nathan think clearly regardless. His rage pushed him forward, but it no longer distracted him from his purpose. On the other hand, Woundless Berserker was the only class choice that didn't mention Nathan's anti-magic at all. Given that he still wanted to fight the most powerful mages on the continent, that was a pretty large downside. His anti-magic was good, but it definitely wasn't perfect. Some kinds of magic still affected him, and anything sufficiently fast and external could still hurt. Like when the siege spike ripped off my hand, or the explosives from this fortress knocking me around. If I start fighting really powerful mages, then even a tiny fraction of their magic could be enough to badly hurt me or at least send me flying. Nathan found Manadrinker Einherjar amusing, not because of the abilities but because of the name. An Einherjar was one of the valiant dead of Norse mythology, retrieved by the Valkyries from the field of battle. The name literally translated to army of one, and they fought, drank, and feasted in Valhalla until the day of Ragnarok, where they would serve as the army of Asgard. How does Davrar know that? I haven't heard of any Norse gods around here. Maybe it skimmed it off my brain, or is just communicating in a familiar language. Regardless, it's a flattering class title to be offered. Though I certainly hope Odin doesn't show up and start telling me what to do, the class itself was interesting. It made his stamina usage better, though Nathan wasn't entirely happy with the vagueness of enhance your ability to use stamina. Would it make his stamina usage more efficient, increase his stamina's overall effect, or both? He tended to spend stamina on almost every action in combat because he had stamina to spare. Increasing the benefit of that sounded great. Faster, stronger, tougher, basically everything I want in a single skill. But the other skills didn't stand out as much. Increasing the amount of stamina Nathan got from absorbing magic sounded good, but he really hadn't had issues conserving his stamina so far. His fights were just so magic-heavy that it didn't matter, and it didn't seem like it would change anytime soon. In fact, the thing that sets apart most of the really dangerous threats is that they're more magical. Similarly, the weapon skill looked good on the surface, but it didn't say anything about not disenchanting the weapons he would use, and unenchanted weapons wouldn't cut it against any of the foes he was planning on fighting. I could probably develop magic absorption to have enough control to wield enchanted weapons. But then those weapons could be targeted by magic, and I couldn't use that development to make my magic absorption more powerful. I really want to be able to extend my anti-magic, either as an aura or a ranged attack or something, and using it to wield weapons would likely prevent that. Nathan clenched his fists. They'd served him pretty well as weapons, and would only get better as he kept leveling and improving. He didn't want to waste a class skill on weapon proficiency. The next class was also funny, but in the sort of opposite direction. Magic's Under Siegebreaker seems like the natural development of Spellbreaker Juggernaut. Bigger, scarier, with more potent offensive anti-magic. This is the class I should take if I want to bust through an enchanted castle wall, glare at somebody and go, "I'm the Juggernaut, bitch." The class ticked a lot of boxes. Improved anti-magic, especially against items. Enchanted weapons usually failed after a few strikes against Nathan, but with Magic's Under Siegebreaker, it seemed like they might break before they'd even finished their first strike. The supremely enhanced durability while raging was also cool, similar to what he'd get from Woundless Berserker, but restricted to raging and with a side of battering ram. That also synergized with the final class skill, which helped him shatter solid fortifications. It was a class with a solid theme, which let Nathan charge a magical castle and knock it over. That was neat, but not really in line with what Nathan was building towards. After all, I'm planning on being able to fly, so I could just go over the wall instead, and it won't help my movement very much. Or rather, it will, but not for dodging, which is what the Guardians of Gemor recommended. The last class was more in line with that. Implacable Antimage would enhance his anti-magic mobility and hand-to-hand combat skills. True, the anti-magic enhancement was only while raging, but it was a general improvement, protecting him from both enchanted items and spells. And the only while raging part could be seen as a blessing. Nathan could benefit from magic like the transit roads while not raging, but he could rage to punch through hostile spatial effects and the like. I hope it will, at least. The increase in agility sounded great, actually. Nathan already had 3 mobility skills and 1 mobility talent, and they synergized beautifully. But there was always room for more. The lack of specificity was again a concern, but something that boosted agility would likely fill a hole in Nathan's build. He had slow fall and sprinting to help him build and control momentum, while dodging footwork and tumbling adjusted that momentum to dodge attacks. But none of those skills really helped Nathan adjust his body more quickly. The utility skills didn't let him do supernatural things, they just made him inhumanly skilled. Though that might change once they get above high tier and go unique. That'll be cool. A class skill to get his limbs into the positions that tumbling demanded would be pretty great. Though it was worth noting that Mana-Drinker Einherjar would probably achieve something similar with its stamina enhancement. The final benefit of Implacable Antimage was an increase to his skill in hand-to-hand combat. That was less exciting but still welcome, and meshed with his plan to continue without weapons. Nathan had always worried about how he'd fare against more physical fighters. This skill wouldn't solve all of those problems, but it was a step in the right direction. At the very least, it should let him fight people who had specialized in close combat on an even playing field. Though it won't do much against the giant monsters. What am I supposed to do? Punch a siege boar? It would be like punching a battle tank. Then there were the further developments of each class to consider. All of the options sounded interesting, but Implacable Antimage really stuck out to Nathan. The ability to permanently drain somebody of magic. Maybe he wouldn't have to kill all of the archmages after all. Draining them of magic and letting them live might be a more fitting punishment. Deflecting or controlling hostile magic sounded pretty cool too. If I can't cast magic, steal it. Neat. Not as excited about specializing in the close quarters combat part, but I definitely need to get better at it. Magic's Under Siegebreaker also had the potential to develop in a way that would let Nathan break city-scale enchantments. Maybe if he kept along that path, he'd be able to break whatever caused the endings. That's making a lot of assumptions, though. That there's some world-sized enchantment causing the endings, and that breaking it won't break the world itself. Regardless, Nathan didn't want to make this decision on his own. He wanted input from his friends, the people who'd be fighting besides him in the future. He stretched, then called to Sarah and Kachai. "Hey, can I get some advice?" Chapter 33, The Leveling Game. Sarah and Kachai walked over, looking down at Nathan sprawled in his chair. Sarah was unamused. "What?" He shrugged from the seated position. "I'm tired. I've already broken the magic in this chair. No need to spread it around. I hereby claim this chair for my butt since it won't shape itself to any other." Kachai snorted, sitting down on a couch across from Nathan. He leaned back and set his armored sabatons on the low, delicately carved table between them with a scrape of metal. "We're not being very careful with this place, but we won't be here long." Nathan shook his head of the distraction and looked up at Sarah. "Well, go on and sit down. I want to ask about my class development." Sarah raised her eyebrows at him as she sat next to Kachai. "I admit I'm blasphemously curious. What will you share with us?" Nathan considered for a moment. Paraphrasing and explaining his options would help him conceptualize them, and it wasn't like he had a ton of secrets left from the heirs, so he got started. "I have 4 options." Kachai rumbled in satisfaction. "Good. It is common to receive fewer choices as you reach higher levels, depending on your insights and deeds." Arl said he had 3 options. I had 2, though my choice was clear. Stella was an anomaly. Yeah, she had like 6, but about half of them were my fault, so Sarah waved Kachai to silence, beckoning for Nathan to continue. "The first leans into my regeneration. Says it will make me nearly unkillable and much stronger, but I don't think it will enhance my anti-magic or my mobility much. The second will make me better at absorbing mana for stamina and make me generally stronger and faster, as well as helping me use all kinds of weapons." Sarah pursed her lips. "Will it enable you to wield enchanted weapons?" "I don't think so. I have a development of magic absorption coming up. I could probably make it more selective then." "What occurs?" Arl walked up, wiping his hands on a cloth. Kachai beckoned him to a seat. "Nathan speaks of his level 81 developments. Since he has no mentor, we will give him advice." Stella followed Arl, and she harumphed at having to drag over another of the comfortable couches to be included in their little circle. She quickly gave up on pulling the heavy furniture and flicked it over with a force spell. "Our parents already gave him advice," she said. "Remind me what they said." "Mobility, survivability, and stealth," Sarah answered. "Do any of your classes grant stealth?" Nathan waved them to silence. "Let me finish going through it. Woundless Berserker is resilience and strength. Manadrinker Einherjar is better magic absorption, general physical enhancements and weapons. The next one is Magic Sunder Siegebreaker, and it's about breaking enchantments and going through buildings, generally being unstoppable. The last one is Implacable Antimage, and it seems like the best one to me. Better anti-magic while raging, better mobility and enhancement to hand-to-hand combat ability." Sarah leaned forward, pulling out a knife and her current whittling project, a little replica of the dungeon they were currently underneath. "What in a muckgrabber's slimy asshole is an Einherjar?" "Something from Earth," Nathan explained. "Legendary warriors of one of our pantheons. They're famous for being excellent fighters and going into rages. Also all dead. Being an Einherjar is sort of an afterlife for those who died in battle, collected by Valkyries and all that." "I wonder if Davrar is trying to tell me something. Hopefully not." Stella pointed at Nathan, a spark of lightning on her finger drawing his attention. "Your choice should depend on your future plans and ours. Will you stay with us? Will you fight Giant's Rest on your own? If you want to fight on your own, your choice should be Implacable Antimage." Kachai picked up the thread of conversation, frowning at Stella's remark. "But we have sworn our oaths together. You must consider your role within the heirs. Woundless Berserker is excellent for one who would draw the enemy's ire, stand alone and unsupported while the rest of us slay the foe. Manadrinker Einherjar would do best with our support, granting you continual magic and relying on us to create openings for your weapons. If you wish to kill the enemy, Such a class seems well suited. Arl pulled out one of his sabers and started to polish it to have something to do with his hands. You wanted to fight larger foes, monsters, and other fighters, who require more than your fists to defeat. Manadrinker Einherjar seems the best path to that. Sarah and I can teach you weapons and provide unenchanted versions. The strength you gain from this class will mean that lacking enchantments is no blood from our wounds. And then you can develop your talent to allow you to wield enchanted items and share in the loot you help us collect. Stella had pulled out her braid from the back of her robes, running her fingers over the entwined hairs as she waited for Arl to finish his point. And Magic's Under Siegebreaker seems built to kill dungeons. If we want to stop the ending of history by clearing countless dungeons, then that class is good. She paused, making eye contact with Nathan, trying very hard to communicate that she didn't have any expectations. This choice is less about what option is best and more about what option you want. A knife stuck point first into the table as Sarah stabbed it down with exasperation. Harpy's tits, there is a best choice here. Nathan is an antimage. He kills mages and destroys magic. We take care of everything else. It would be a waste to develop magic absorption to let him wield enchanted weapons. Should he be a second-tier fighter who is hard to hurt with magic or a complete counter to all magic? She continued, seemingly frustrated at all of them. This choice is Nathan's. And while the other choices may make Nathan more dependent on us, implacable Antimage is the option that will let him topple Giant's Rest and their magics. He means to do that and we might not follow him, that's okay, but we cannot hamper him in that quest because we are afraid for him. Sarah looked around at the other heirs. It is time to speak of this. I do not want to fight Giant's Rest. I will defend myself if they attack us, but I do not want to attack such foes. Not even as a game. She heaved a sigh and bowed her head. Sorry, Nathan, he nodded, scrubbing a hand through his hair. Yeah, it's unreasonable to expect you to come with me when I go after Giant's Rest. I don't have to fear most of what they can do, but I really can't judge you for not wanting to directly challenge them. The consequences could be so much worse than death. I hoped, but this shouldn't be a surprise. I'm disappointed by this, but I really couldn't have expected it to go any other way. I might be able to use earnestness to encourage them, but I'm not going to do that. I promise not to, for one thing, and it would be a dick move for another. Nathan gave an expansive shrug. The heirs were clearly trying to gauge his reaction, but they weren't disputing what Sarah had said. Arl looked relieved, Stella hesitant, and Kache frowned as he considered his position. If any of them would come with me, it would be Kache. Nathan addressed all of them without anger. What I've said about giving to friends and not expecting things in return, I meant that. I am not trying to play the long game to manipulate you into fighting Giant's Rest with me. I won't lie, I was hoping that eventually you might agree, but part of friendship is respecting people's decisions, and I respect your decision not to fight Giant's Rest. High-tier earnestness 8 achieved. There was a moment of silence as the heirs digested his statement. It was broken by Kache. I am glad to hear as much. I respect your goals, Nathan Lark, and will light a flame for your success. We will do what we can to help prepare you for your conflict with Giant's Rest. For now, this is helping you choose an effective class and helping you level, and assuring you that you are a member of the heirs, no matter if you leave our company for a time to topple an evil empire. Nathan met his eyes. Is there any other kind of empire? Maybe we can all team up to take on Agman afterwards. Arl rolled his eyes dramatically. If you want to topple Agman, Magic's Under Siegebreaker is probably the best. They've got enchanted fortifications that surpass this outpost. Imagine trying to take this place if it was defended by Agman legionaries. Okay, that does sound pretty rough, even if I could fly. But the master of many weapons wasn't done. However, my sister is right. For fighting Giant's Rest on your own, implacable Antimage is best. Nathan turned Stella. She'd been pretty quiet ever since Sarah blew up. She looked apprehensive more than anything. Maybe she feels the most doubt about telling me no. I've taught her so much, but all that does is paint a bigger target on her from Giant's Rest's perspective. She tried to speak, then swallowed and gave him a weak smile. Sorry, she paused, searching for words to soften the blow. I might be convinced to destroy Giant's Rest if you teach me magic that would let me do it. Nathan tilted his head from side to side. I'm fine with killing all the mages of Giant's Rest. I'd rather not kill everybody else there too. Stella squinted at him. So you do have insights that would let me blow up Giant's Rest. Can I learn them anyway? Nathan shook his head. The more I teach you, the more Giant's Rest will try to capture you. You know that, right? She waved dismissively. They'd like to capture us all anyways, as trophies if nothing else. This doesn't change much. And besides, the more magic I know, the better I can defend myself. Fair enough. I can trust my friends to take care of themselves, and I need to plan to be without their support when I do eventually take on Giant's Rest. That tilts my opinion farther towards implacable Antimage. Do you need to be able to blow up a city? He asked Stella. That's about all some of those insights are good for. She threw her arms wide, clearly happy to be in more comfortable territory. It's a nice option to have around one's neck. When you need to blow up a city, it's too late to learn. Besides, it would also let me blow up dungeons, right? She's got a point. Still not convinced teaching her nuclear physics is a good idea. Lasers are a good next step. Nathan sniffed at the air, smelling a faint burning scent. Is something on fire? The food. Arl jumped to his feet, running back into the kitchen, Stella close on his heels. While a bit burnt, the food was still edible. Over the next few hours, the airs settled into the comfortable suite with relish. The beds were also enchanted, so Nathan camped out on the carpet with his bedroll, while Arl and Sarah took one bed. Stella had lost a game of sword spearaxe with Kache for the other one, so she was sleeping on the largest couch in the living room. They weren't splitting up for propriety, but because the beds weren't enormous, and the big wolf folk would take up the entirety of one of them. Nathan kept thinking about his class choices but didn't bring them up with the heirs again. He had gotten their advice. Now he needed to reflect on it and think about the guidance he'd gotten from others, both from the Guardians and Artha, the elk centaur adventurer who had set Nathan on the path of rage. He was pretty certain he should just take implacable Antimage, but wanted to give himself some more time to reconsider, seeing if any potential inspiration struck. He went through his existing talents and skills, thinking about how developments of each would integrate with the various class choices. Still, implacable Antimage came out on top. It would work best with the high-mobility style he was building and would tie in well with any future developments of his antimagic. The next day, the heirs thoroughly explored the outpost and the surrounding area. Nathan had been expecting more armories inside the walls, another subterranean section. But it soon became clear the control room and suite were the only spaces designed with people in mind. Even the towers were simply solid blocks of enchantment, ammunition and golem storage, without more than a maintenance accessway for people to see the interior. The castle didn't even have a gatehouse, just 4 solid stone walls that looked out over this barren and cratered section of valley. It was a nice view at least, and Nathan spent some time on watch, just in case the signal from the crystal reactor had been sent out and something was coming to evict them. But nothing happened. Soon enough, the heirs retired to their rest. Dinner wasn't burnt, and afterwards Nathan settled into his designated seat to consider his class development from all angles and try to make a final decision. This definitely feels like one of the more significant decisions I'll make. No, scratch that. The most significant decision I made was to oppose Tial in the very beginning, even if that was more of a necessary consequence of my moral stance on things and not a real decision. Nathan thought about the future developments of the different class options and which one sounded the most appealing. Ultimately, The ones focused on the most unique thing about him, his anti-magic won out. And those future developments were also coming from implacable Antimage. Again and again, he came to the conclusion that implacable Antimage was best. After meditating and finding that he was calm and centered on the topic, Nathan decided that he'd given the matter enough consideration. He selected implacable Antimage. Congratulations, you are now an implacable Antimage. 3 of your existing class skills have developed, and you have unlocked 3 new class skills. These skills are tied to your parent class, and their power will increase with your level in that class. Davrar applauds your choice and hopes you will continue to survive and prosper. Class skill Stamina has become Deepened Stamina. You have exceeded your stamina maximum many times. Your stamina capacity is tripled. Stamina will accumulate during periods of rest and can be spent to improve the speed and strength of your movements, or used for other skills or talents that utilize stamina. Class skill Juggernaut's Wrath has become Antimage's Impassivity. Pain and injury will only drive you further onwards, and you will have resistance to mind-affecting skills while raging. Being attacked with magic will enhance the intensity of your rage. Class skill Antimagic Momentum. Motion enhances your inherent antimagic, allowing you to break magical effects with your movements and blows. The greater the momentum behind the motion, the greater the enhancement. Effect is further enhanced while raging. Class skill Raging Thrill. You can voluntarily enter and exit a rage state where you will be immersed in the thrill of combat. This will rapidly consume stamina, but will greatly increase your strength, speed, and resilience to damage. Class skill Juggernaut's Inertia has become Implacable Inertia. Your motions carry significantly greater momentum, and any attempt to slow your movement is hindered. Magical effects will be almost completely unable to change your velocity. Class skill Unarmored Resilience. When not wearing armor, your body becomes more resilient to damage from all sources. New class skill Improved Antimagic. While raging, your antimagic talent is greatly enhanced and will be especially effective at protecting you from hostile magic. New class skill Strenuous Agility. You will move more quickly and easily, especially when reorienting your body in combat. Stamina spent on mobility will have a greater effect. New class skill Hand-to-Hand Expertise. You will be faster, hit harder, and be more skilled at unarmed combat. You have leveled up to level 88.